Good morning, everyone. So today we're going to be working on the big toe relationship to hip flexion, hip extension, and hip flexion related to our gait mechanics. One thing I like to tell clients and students is that the big toe is the driver of the bus. With every step that we take, we need about 65 degrees of big toe extension in order to get into our full range of motion of our gait mechanics. And so if one big toe is limited because it's tight, restricted, unable to achieve that full range of motion, it is going to limit hip extension, which is then going to limit glute activation related to our gait. And it's going to do so on one side of our body more so than the other side. And that creates significant imbalances through the rest of the hips and the spine, shoulders, neck. Everything gets impacted by that starting at the big toe. So assessing big toe mobility is important. Assessing big toe mobility related to the hips is really valuable, really helpful. One of the big things with big toe, lack of big toe extension, is you'll find hip pain, back pain go up significantly. So we're going to start with an assessment of the big toe in the hip in the half kneeling position. We're going to then use the lacrosse ball to do a little soft tissue work on the bottom of the foot specific to the big toe to see if we can mobilize it a little bit more and see how that impacts hip flexion. You should notice a improvement in really the hip extension aspect of our pelvic tilt in that half kneeling position. So with all that, let's get started. So we're going to start in the half kneeling position, and this is primarily for an assessment first. We're going to come back into this position to work on mobility, but right now I want to get in half kneeling. I want to have the big toe tucked underneath as if we're going to jump out of this position into a dead sprint. I want to feel that load at the big toe. I want knee directly under hip, directly under shoulder, and directly under the head. And the first thing I kind of want to feel is, does that big toe feel tight or stiff? And we're going to get into our breath, breathing into our belly, filling up that belly, and allowing our pelvis to tilt forward. This is anterior tilt. This will give us a nice sway in the low back. On our exhale, as we draw our navel into our spine, we're going to scoop into our pelvis. That's taking us into posterior tilt. Inhale takes us anterior, exhale takes us posterior. Now, as we're going back and forth through that breath, we'll do about 5 up to 10 reps. Feel how that big toe digs into the ground. Notice the tightness, tension, stretch around the big toe and the arch of the foot. And also notice the stretch on the front of the hip. Does it feel restricted? Are you able to get full extension where that hip is nice and straight? Or do you stay a little bit anterior where it's hard to get that last bit of scoop? And we're going to switch and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So as we switch feet, again, get that big toe tucked and loaded. And right off the bat, you might notice that one big toe feels a little stiffer than the other. Right now, my left big toe feels a little tighter. My left hip also feels a little tighter than the right side did. Everything else we're doing the same. Breathing into that belly as we go into anterior. Exhale, draw that navel in as we scoop. And feel, how does that big toe feel? Does it feel tight, stiff, and tighter, stiffer, or less tight, less stiff than the other side? As we go back and forth, 5 up to 10 reps. Now, as I'm getting into this, left hip is significantly tighter than my right hip. Left big toe is significantly tighter than my right. Now, I want to go ahead and do this a second time because simply going through it one time helps to mobilize it. The second time might give us a little bit better sense and feel for the difference. So I'm back to my right big toe, inhale into that belly, exhale, feel that scoop. Already I'm getting a little bit more range of motion than I did the first time, but the big toe and this hip are a lot, I got more mobility, I have more access to movement. When we switch back to the other side, I can feel a little bit looser just because it's the second time, but it is still noticeably a difference in tension on this side compared to the other side. So that's the initial assessment. Now, we're going to go ahead and come up to a standing position. We're going to grab our ball, either a lacrosse ball, tennis ball will work, a racket ball may work. And I like having a staff or something that we can balance on so that we don't have to focus on our balance work. And we're going to do a little bit of work specifically on the big toe line. So we're going to place the ball of the big toe on top of the ball and then move the foot forward so that the ball moves just south of the big toe into that nice meaty section of the big toe line. And from here, I just want to allow gravity, allow the weight of my leg to melt into the ball. This is where I like to think about the ball is a hot knife. The tissue of your body is just melting butter. And if you put melting butter on a hot knife, the butter melts itself. You don't have to push. It doesn't take force. And we're going to take some nice deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. And as you feel that melting, we can very gently move forward and backwards about half an inch to an inch. We don't need to go very far along that big toe line. I want to stay with the big toe moving down towards the heel and see if you can find a sensitive spot. And I want that sensitive spot to not be at a level 3 or above on the pain scale. On a scale of 0 to 10, I want to keep that discomfort of that spot below a level 3. So in the level 1, level 2 category. And again, just softening, feeling it melt. And as it melts to about 30 to 40%, we can then kind of move either up or down that line of the big toe and see if there's any other sensitive spots. And we can spend, between 30 and 90 seconds on each spot, and we can work 2 to 3 spots on that big toe line. Now, I'm not going to work a lot of the rest of the foot. I'm focusing specifically on the big toe today. That doesn't mean that you can't use the ball on the other areas of the foot. You can actually get a lot of benefit of it, but for the purpose of today's assessment, I want to keep it on that big toe line. And even if you're working on the side that is less stiff, it's probably going to have some areas of sensitivity to it, so you're going to feel some benefit to this action. We'll kind of finish up with this one last spot for another 30 seconds. Again, nice deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. And we're going to switch and do the same thing on the other side. Now, I started on the side that was less stiff, moving to the side that was more stiff. And so, again, placing the ball of the big toe on top of the ball itself, and then slowly moving so that the ball goes just south of the big toe joint into that nice meaty section where it's probably going to be a little bit sensitive. And this is a little bit more sensitive on this foot than it was on the other foot, which is what I would expect for a side that's a little tighter. Generally, if things are a little tighter, those muscles are staying short and tight, which makes them very neurologically active. And when muscles are neurologically active, they tend to be incredibly sensitive to touch. They're kind of sensitive to everything because there's just a lot of they're being asked to do a whole lot. Again, nice deep breaths as we feel that melting action. I'm not pushing, I'm not forcing weight into the leg, I'm just allowing the weight of my leg to melt. And as this one melts, it's definitely more sensitive, especially as I continue to move to the next spot. Again, with each spot, I only want about a 30 to 40% reduction in that sensitivity. I'm not looking for 100%. We can get 100% by staying here and just continuing to press, but I don't find that that leads to good outcomes. I actually find that that can be more harmful. The 30 to 40% reduction, all we're doing is getting some tissue ischemia, which is basically pushing out all the blood in that area so that when we take the foot off the ball, we get a fresh rush of blood flow, helps remove waste properties from that chronically overworked muscle that's not able to go to full length, and brings in fresh nutrients, removes those wastes that are kind of like getting stuck and stagnant in that area of the foot. We'll find one more spot, taking some nice deep breaths. As you're getting some pressure on the ball, you can even do a little bit of very light flexion and extension of that toe, as long as it doesn't elevate the level of pain. Again, I want to keep that pain in the level 1, level 2 category, which is slight discomfort. It should kind of like feel good massage pain. It should not be, ramping up where your body's kind of stiffening to protect you from it. If you're getting that, then you're pushing too hard. So go ahead and finish up with that spot. We're going to move the ball to the side. We're going to come, actually, we're going to keep our staff. We're now going to do a little bit of foot mobility in the standing position before we come back and reassess our half kneeling. So I want to have the staff again. If you have balance issues, I would rather you be able to focus on the mobility of your big toe than worry about standing stability. So if you have good balance, you don't necessarily need to use the staff, but I will encourage the staff so that you can focus on the foot. From here, we're going to take a nice long reach step back. This will be basically gait level stance. This is not a short reach. This is as long as you comfortably can, but I want to keep that weight on the front leg. I don't want our weight to shift onto our back foot. So as we reach, keep that weight forward, plant the ball of the foot to the floor. From here, we're going to actively straighten the back knee and reach that heel to the floor like we're trying to touch the floor with it, but we're doing so without shifting weight back. So I want to see how far can you reach that floor. Notice that you have to bend that front knee a little bit. Then we're going to peel the heel off the floor, planting through the ball of the big toe, driving that heel straight up to the ceiling. That will give us some mobility at the big toe. And then we're straightening that heel as we actively straighten our knee. And we'll do 5 up to 10 of these. Exhale as you drive that heel up. Inhale as you reach that heel back and actively straighten that knee. I want to actively push that knee like you're trying to touch the wall behind you. Now, as we drive the foot up, we're getting foot big toe mobility. As we reach that heel back and actively straighten the knee, we're getting hip extension. So we're feeling that stretch, maybe a stretch, especially if you have a stiff big toe. If you have good foot mobility, you might not notice much of a stretch in the front of the hip. And then we're going to switch and do the same thing on the other side. So again, nice big stride back, keeping that weight on the front leg. From here, we're actively straightening that knee trying to touch the wall with our knee as we reach the heel to the floor. And this hip, I feel it right off the bat. It makes me want to shift my weight back. I have less mobility in that hip. We're going to exhale as we plant the foot, driving the heel up to the ceiling, and I feel the big toe a lot more on this foot here. Inhale as we actively reach. Try to keep that weight on that front leg. Drive through that ball as we lift the heel up to the ceiling. As you're reaching that knee back and heel back, if you do feel more stretch on this side, kind of see if you can sit into it a little bit. As you really kind of see if you can feel a little bit more, can you get a little bit more length with each one without forcing it. After 5 to 10, we're going to switch back to the other side. We're going to do the exact same thing, but now we're going to add a reach. So as I step back, again, weight is staying on front leg, actively reaching that heel to the floor, actively straightening the knee. As we bend and plant, driving the heel up. On the next reach, as we reach that heel back, we're going to add reaching our hand straight up to the ceiling. So I'm actively straightening that knee, reaching the heel back, and I'm reaching up like I'm trying to touch the ceiling at the exact same time. Inhale, bringing the arm down lightly as I plant through that foot. Exhale, reach back through the hip, up through the hand. This is going to help draw some length through the front of the hip up into that abdominal viscera. We're also getting some side body extension in our spine, so we're getting a little bit of spinal mobility related to both big toe and hip, and then spine. Once we do 5 to 10, switching and doing the same thing on the other side. So nice long step back, keep that weight on the front leg. Start with that reaching the heel back, actively straightening the knee. Then we'll bend, let the knee soften as we plant the foot. And on the next one, as we extend and reach that heel, adding in our reach with our hand. Again, my left side is generally my tighter side. I definitely feel that tension in the big toe and the hip. And adding in that reach, I can really feel that stretch in the front of the hip. Add a little bit more. Although the second time around on it, it actually feels a little bit more mobile. Once we do 5 up to 10, we're going to go ahead and come all the way up. We can set our staff down to the side, and we're going to come back into our half kneeling. And so we're going to start, we're going to go back through our first assessment, and then we're going to add a few more layers to it. So big toe, I'm on my right side because that's where I started. Knee is directly under hip, directly under shoulders, directly under the head. Inhale. Fill up that belly, allow the pelvis to tilt forward. Make sure that big toe is tucked and loaded. Exhale, draw the navel in as we scoop. Feel that length through the front of the hip. Now, even if this was the less stiff side, you should notice that you're getting a little bit more range of motion in both the big toe and in that scoop. Especially if you're a little bit, if this is the first movement of the day, just doing it, getting a little bit of mobility in the hip is going to improve overall joint mobility. So we can do 5 reps here And then we're going to switch to the other side. Again, head over shoulders, over hips, over knee. Inhale, fill that belly, get a nice sway in the back. Exhale, scoop, and feel that big toe and hip. Now this is a reassessment. How different does it feel? I still have a difference between the left side and the right side. My left side is still stiffer. However, it is less stiff than it was through the first assessment. I have a little bit more access to hip extension. It's not as big of a stretch, but I can get further into it. Same thing with the big toe. Once we do 5, we're going to switch to the other side. And now we're going to add in our reach. So everything that we just did is going to be the same from the hip down to the foot. Big toe is tucked underneath. Inhale, filling up that belly as the pelvis tilts forward. Exhale as we scoop. And now we're adding in that hand, reaching up to the ceiling. I want to make sure that hip is locked in. Scoop, lock that hip in. Then add the reach. Don't allow the reach to take away from that hip. We're going to do this for 5 as well. Nice inhale, exhale, feel that scoop, feel that lift. Notice how that reaching up through the hands draws that stretch of the front of the hip up a little bit into the abdominals. And it might not feel like a big stretch. It's just lengthening, right? Feel that opening up action. And we'll switch and do the same thing on the other side. Feeling that nice scoop and then adding in that nice reach. And this is where I feel a lot more tension on the left side compared to the right side. And with each one, I'm seeing if I can get a little bit further into it, a little bit more mobility action. After 5, we're going to switch back to the other side. And now I'm going to add in a lunge. So again, big toe is tucked in. I don't want to lose that big toe. That big toe being tucked in is going to be part of our function of gait, because when we get that extension in the hip, that big toe should be at 65 degrees. So on this next one, as we inhale, tilting the pelvis forward, exhale, scoop. I want to stay actively resisting to maintain your scooped pelvis. But now we're going to very slowly lunge forward. Lunging forward is going to pull you out of the scoop, but we're trying to resist it as much as we can in order to feel that eccentric stretch. Once we get fully forward, we're going to come back on our inhale, exhale, actively scoop. Feel that stretch as we lunge forward. Again, I want to keep that big toe tucked and engaged. I'm doing this for 5 reps. And then switching and doing the same thing on the other side. So nice inhale. As we exhale, scoop. Resist that scoop. Hold it in place as we lunge forward. Feel that nice length take place as we come back. Re-engage our scoop, and then let that traction draw that scoop out, trying to resist it as much as we can, knowing that it's going to be impossible to prevent that positional change at the pelvis. That one feels really good and juicy. I want to make sure none of this is painful. We are not pushing into pain patterns. We're staying in that level 1, level 2, slight discomfort, It should feel good and juicy. It should not be elevating into pain. I don't want to be seeing people scrunching up, making pirate faces because they're pushing their bodies too hard. When we're doing a mobility practice, pain should not be a part of it. That will give you the wrong feedback to your nervous system, and you'll actually see your mobility reduce when you move in such ways. All right, we're going to grab our staff one more time as we switch back to the other side. So we're still in our half kneeling. I want to bring the staff up to our shoulders. We're going to place the staff on the top of both shoulders and then place one hand on top of this, doing a nice little cross over the top of the staff. Elbows, keep them somewhat elevated. I want to make a shelf of our shoulders so that the staff stays in contact with the top of the front of each shoulder. We're using this in order to maintain a square chest. We're going to add in a rotation to what we're doing. So we're still inhale, pelvis goes forward. Exhale, we scoop. Feel that stretch on the front of the hip. I want to lock into that hip. And then we are going to want to have your eyes fixed on a point on the wall in front of you. As you exhale and rotate your chest, you're seeing how far can you turn your chest towards the wall at your side without drawing your eyes and your head away from that fixed point on the wall. Inhale, as we come back to forward, pelvis scoops forward or tilts forward. Exhale, we scoop. As we rotate, keeping eyes forward. Now, as we're rotating, I don't want the knee to rotate with. So kind of maintain tension in the lower body so that the lower body is not moving with the rotation of our upper body. Locking in that back hip on the scoop, seeing how much can you squeeze into that rotation, keeping that staff even on both shoulders. Once we've done 5, we're going to switch and do the same thing on the other side. So again, big toe is tucked and loaded. Inhale, pelvis tilts forward. Exhale, draw the navel in as you scoop. Lock that hip in and add in rotation. Eyes are fixed on a point on the wall in front. Now, as I'm getting into that big toe and my front hip on my left side, it feels, I'd say, about 70% better than it did from the first assessment. I have a lot more mobility, and even adding in the rotation feels a lot better. Once we get to 5, nice squeeze. We can go ahead and set the staff down to the side. And we're going to come down into our shin box position. Now I'm going to start on starting on my left side because that's the side I've been working on. So I'm in my left side shin box. My left knee is forward. I'm bringing my left hand down to the floor and grounding that palm as much as I can into the floor. I'm going to spiral that elbow pit out and away. Feel that shoulder blade pack down and back as we lift sternum in order to be nice and tall in the spine. I want our weight shifted onto the front leg. So onto the front hip, left shoulder is the position. If you're on the right side, it would be switched. Opposite hip is going to be off the ground if we shift. One indication for this is I want to make sure that front knee is down to the ground. I don't want it to be lifted up. If your knee is lifted up, that means your weight is shifted back onto your back hip. Shift that weight forward. I want to keep that front knee pinned to the ground. I don't want it to lift up. We're going to do our inhale mobility work on this back hip from being off the ground. We're going to inhale into that nice crocodile breath or balloon breath of our abdominals. as we reach that back hip to the ground. If you can touch the ground, great. If you can't touch the ground, it's not a big deal. On the exhale, we're lifting it off the ground, reaching that hip bone forward as we lightly scoop into it. That scoop, same scoop that we were doing in the half kneeling position. Inhale, reaches back. Exhale, scoops forward. And we can think about this as a range of motion. How much range do you have on this hip? This has been my more mobile hip. I can lightly touch the floor without shifting my weight back. Feel like I can get good extension in the hip. I'm also noticing my glute nice and fired up as I get into hip extension. Once we do 5, we're going to switch to the other side. Again, palm is grounded, elbows spiraled out and away, feeling the shoulder blade packed down and back. Nice tall spine. Weight is forward on this side. Opposite hip should be off the ground. From here, nice inhale into our abdominals as we reach that hip to the floor. Exhale, we're lifting that hip up, reaching that hip bone forward as we slightly scoop into it. Now we've already assessed differences in one hip compared to the other. I already know this hip is tighter, and man, I definitely feel it in this position. I have less range of motion. This hip, not quite. I'm close to touching the ground on that reach on the inhale. On my exhale, it's a struggle to get quite as much extension. I'm starting to feel that glute activate. And so if you're finding that it's difficult to get one hip to fully extend and to feel that hip activate, this is something that we want to work on regularly for a while. That means that we have some imbalance between one side and the other. It's not going to come back from just one session, from doing this one time. It has to be a daily practice, because part of what's going on is neurological, and neurological is patterns, and patterns are based on time and repetition. It takes time and repetition to build good patterns. So these are practices that I would incorporate every day, and possibly multiple times a day, especially if you're dealing with chronic pain, knee pain, back pain, shoulder and neck pain can be related to this. So if you're finding these imbalances, I would say that this is something that's really important to include in your movement practice every day. And it doesn't take a lot of time. It takes me a long time to teach it. We're going to switch back to the other side. It takes me a long time to teach it in a video, but once you learn these movements, you can go through them in a few minutes and get a tremendous amount of value out of them. So I'm back on my original side, grounded palm, spiraled elbow, packed shoulder. We're going to do the same inhale, letting that hip drop. On the exhale, as we scoop, we're now going to go into our folds. So I want to have that back hip lightly scooped and active. I want to lock into that back hip, and we're going to fold into our shins. Both hands reaching evenly, seeing how far can you comfortably reach with your fingertips. Inhale, we're coming all the way back up, letting that back hip reach to the floor. Exhale, scoop and fold. As we reach, I don't want one hand reaching further than the other. That means you're getting some rotation in your spine. That might mean that you have some tightness and tension in the spine. So I want to feel those hands reaching as even as possible. The other thing I want to pay attention to on my folds is I do not want to drop my head to the floor where I have this rounded upper back and spine. That's not getting me a whole lot into my hips. I want to keep my spine tall. As I exhale, I'm just simply sliding those hands forward. And with each one, we're seeing if we can go a little bit further. Once we've done 5 up to 10 reps on one side, we're going to switch and do the same thing on the other side. Now this movement is a really good assessment point as well, which is why I'm using my shins to maintain a square shoulders so I can kind of get a good idea how well can I fold on my right side compared to the left side. So as I inhale, letting that hip drop, exhale, scooping into it, and then reaching both hands evenly through the shin. Inhale brings it all the way back. Now the interesting thing on this particular movement, since we are locking in that back hip, if that back hip is tighter on one side, it's going to mean that you're probably feeling more restriction in your fold as well. You might notice that it's tighter in the glute on the opposite hip. That's because the front of your left hip is paired to the back of your right hip in gait mechanics. When we get into hip extension on our left side, we are in glute, we're getting a big glute, eccentric glute stretch on the right side. So both sides are kind of lengthening and stretching at the same time related to our gait mechanics. Once we've gone through both sides 5 to 10 times, now we're going to start going back and forth, moving all the way across, getting into a nice fold. Inhale as we bring it back. We'll take an extra breath as we transition from one side to the other so that we're exhaling as we reach on the other side. And for this one, we're going to do a little bit higher reps, 10 to 20 reps side to side. And we're going to add a little bit of other mobility into it as we go. This is by going back and forth, we can really get a feel for what feels similar, and more importantly, what feels dissimilar between the right side and the left side. Once we've done 3 to 5 reps on each side, we're going to now start to open up that back hip. We're going to make our shin box a little bit wider. This will change the orientation of where we're folding. I'm less concerned about following the shin, and I'm more interested in exploring. Where does our body want to go? Where does our body not want to go? How is it different on the left side compared to the right side? With each one, we can continue to open up that back hip a little bit more. By opening up that back hip, we're adding a little bit different mobility angles into that back hip. It's also changing our orientation on our front hip. So it's just providing some different kinds of mobility and lengthening into those tissues. It should feel really good and juicy, and it might also give us some information as far as what is different. Where are there some potential other imbalances that we want to look at? We'll do a couple more going side to side where we're working to get as close to a yoga class pigeon pose as we comfortably can without forcing it and without going into pain. So seeing how far can we now reach that back leg as we come into our fold. And then doing the same thing on the other side. I'm going to do one more side to side, especially that last one. I could actually really feel that left hip opening up a little bit more, getting into some more juiciness. That my right hip just feels so much freer than the left hip, which I always find fascinating because it's my right knee that has had the most surgeries. So the assumption would be that the right hip and the right foot would be the side that's tighter and stiffer, but it's actually the opposite side, because the opposite side is where my body has the ability to create stability to support that right knee. All right, last bit. Actually, not last bit. I got one more thing to do in shin box. So we've done a lot to lengthen get some mobility work on the hip flexors. The hip flexors are going to have a direct relationship to our glutes, specific to glute activation. If you lack the ability to extend the hip, you're going to lack the ability to get full glute contraction, because hip extension is glute contraction. So if you cannot extend the hip fully, you cannot contract the glute fully. So we've just done some work to mobilize the hips, give you more access to your glutes. Now I want to do a little bit of work specifically to the glutes. So the first thing we're going to do is our shin box to knees. Now, shin box to knees, I'm always concerned about knee pain, knee discomfort, especially if you have a history of knee problems, such as I do. So I always start the first few reps using hands to assist, to make sure that I am not moving into painful knees. One hand goes behind, the other hand goes in front as I guide myself up to knees. From here, we'll scoop the pelvis to feel a little bit of that stretch in the front of the pelvis. And then coming down, hands come to the floor to help guide so that I'm controlling my weight back down. And then we're switching and doing the same thing on the other side. Hands are in place, using the hands to come up to knees. Feel that little bit of a scoop at the top. And then using the hands to come back down. Now, if the knees are sensitive, using your hands may be where you need to be working at right now. Going into the next part of this, as I switch back to my first side, if the knees do not hurt, we can start to take the hands off the floor. We're driving through both knees into the floor in order to lift our tailbone up, and we're getting that light scoop. On the way down, we are reaching that tailbone back. I'm not dropping straight to the floor. I'm seeing how far back can I reach that tailbone before my hips kiss the ground. Then coming to the other side and doing the same thing. Driving through the legs, scooping the hip up, reaching that back hip as far back as I can. I don't want to plop. I want to reach back till I kiss the floor. If you find that you have a plop or the knees are sensitive, then continue using your hands to guide. And it may be a few weeks to even a few months of using your hands in order to support yourself, in order to build the neurology to be able to do this without your hands. As we go back to the other side, again, at this point, if you don't have knee pain and we're not using hands, now I really want to try to get as much length out of that glute as possible. So as we're reaching back through that tailbone, pushing back, counter reach through your hands. See if you can feel that length as your hip kisses the ground, coming across to the other side, driving up, counter reach as we reach back. I want to see how much can you feel that length and stretch in your glutes from that decel. As you decelerate down to the floor, counter reaching, really bringing as much length as possible into the glutes. And we'll do this for 5 on each side. Notice if there's a difference on the right side and the left side. Notice if you tend to plop on one side more than the other side. Again, those are going to be really important assessment points that are going to relate to our gait mechanics significantly. All right, last movement series is on our back. Feet are going to go flat to the floor. We're going to start with our breath. Bringing breath into our abdominal wall, feeling that balloon action, breathing into the belly, out through the side, and into the low back. On the exhale, we're drawing that navel into the spine like we're trying to push the spine into the floor. As you inhale, we're going to allow that pelvis to tilt up towards the ceiling, which is going to lift your spine off the floor. As you exhale, use your breath and your belly button to press that spine back to the floor. Try not to use your feet. Try to keep the feet soft. Inhale, belly lifts to the ceiling as the pelvis tilts forward. Can you feel some stretch related to the front of the abdominals? I want to avoid any kind of pinch or discomfort in the low back. On the exhale, as you scoop, feel the spine flatten out to the floor without pushing hard into the feet. Now, once we start to feel that nice mobility of the hips and the spine with just our breath, the next is we're going to start to drive through our feet to lift the hips. But I want to peel the tailbone off the floor, peel the sacrum off the floor, and then peel each vertebrae one at a time. So on our inhale, belly's lifted, big sway in the back. As we exhale, belly button presses the spine, and then we continue to scoop the tailbone. And that scoop will lift the sacrum with the L5 still touching. Then we're trying to lift the L5 with the L4 still touching. Lift the L4 with the L3 still touching, and so on, until we get full into our hip extension at the top. At the top, I want to be scooping into it so that we're feeling a light stretch on the front of the hips. And can you feel some activation in the glutes? On the inhale, as we drop down, we're moving one vertebrae at a time. Can you touch your L1, then your L2, then your L3, then L4, L5, and then sacrum. Inhale, let it lift the spine up. Exhale, draw the navel in, scoop as you feel each vertebrae lift one at a time. Inhale, placing each vertebrae one at a time back down. This is a slow inhale to slow exhale. With each one, are you able to scoop that tailbone into it a little bit more at the top? Notice my rib cage is not sticking out. I want that rib cage drawing down as we scoop into it. Rib cage to pelvis should be relatively in line. I don't want that rib sticking out to where we have a big sway in our back. At least not yet. We're going to get into that one in just a second. On the next one, we're going to get into that second being right now. So as the next one, as we inhale, lifting the belly. On the exhale, we're going to go to the top and we're going to stay at the top. I want to maintain our hip drive, and we're going to play with that same inhale, exhale with pelvic tilts in this position. So inhale, we're filling up the belly and we're allowing that pelvis to tilt forward. On the exhale, we're drawing our navel in as we scoop into it. We're going to do this for about 5 or 6 breaths. Try not to let your hips drop on your inhale. Try to maintain the level height of your pelvis, but allow that pelvis to tilt forward on the inhale, and on the exhale, we're really actively scooping into it. By your 5th breath, we should really feel those glutes firing up a little bit more. And then we'll bring our hips back down to the floor. Shake the legs out a little bit. And we're going to finish up with a little bit of crocodile breath. So we're going to make two nice big C shapes with our hands. The thumbs are going to go into the back, feeling into your the low back muscles. Index fingers are wrapping around so that you're getting a little bit of your abdominal muscles. And the palms are pressing into the side so that you're feeling the side abdominal muscles. I want hands to be below the rib cage and above the hip bone. I don't want to be on bone. I want to be in that nice meaty section in the middle. And we're going to inhale, and I want to feel the inhale push out and away into our thumbs in the back, index fingers in the front, and palms through the side. On the exhale, allow your hands to cinch down lightly so that you can create a little bit more resistance for that next inhale breath. I want to use the hands as a way of feeling where that breath moves, more importantly, where it doesn't move, but it also to be able to kind of give you a kinesthetic cue of how to move your breath into that space. So let your hands kind of be a guide of, can I move my breath into that area? You may notice that your breath moves really well into the abdominals, and it might struggle going into the low back or out into the side body. We'll get a good 5 to 10 breaths. With each breath in, see if you can expand that balloon a little bit wider, a little bit more. Once we get through 5 breaths, we can allow our hands to soften down to the side with the palms up. Now I want to get that same sense of breath into the ribs as well. Breathing into the chest, but not just forward. I also want to feel it move out through the side of the ribs and into the upper back rib cage as well. Nice inhale in through the nose, kind of filling up into the tension of the ribs. And on the exhale, we get to allow that tension to just release onto the floor. Now start to allow that breath to move up into the shoulders and into the neck for another 3 to 5 breaths. Again, breathing into tension. And on the exhale, allow that tension to melt into the floor. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes and take your time moving slowly to come up to a sit before you come up to stand. Make sure that you're not feeling dizzy or lightheaded.